December 1944. The Ardennes forest. Snow falling so hard it swallowed sound. Lieutenant Daniel Harper of the U.S. Army wasn't supposed to be there. His platoon had been ordered to fall back at dusk. German forces were breaking through faster than anyone expected, and command needed time to reorganize the defensive line. Harper's unit had one job: delay the enemy, then retreat. But war doesn't care about plans. By nightfall, radio contact with battalion was gone. Artillery support was gone. Half his men were scattered in the woods during the fighting. The only thing Harper knew for sure was this: they were alone, a hill. No one wanted. The hill wasn't important on any map. No supply depot, no major road, no command post, just a frozen rise overlooking a narrow forest road. But that road mattered. Through his field glasses, Harper watched headlights moving far below in the dark. German trucks, armor, infantry columns, dozens, maybe hundreds. If they passed through unchallenged, they would slam straight into an American medical evacuation route behind the lines. Unarmed drivers, wounded soldiers, field surgeons. Harper lowered the glasses slowly. Behind him, only 18 men remained. Cold, exhausted, low on ammunition, and staring at him for answers. The choice Sergeant Miller broke the silence. "Sir, if we stay here, they'll roll right over us." Harper knew he was right. Against that many troops, they wouldn't just lose. They'd disappear. But leaving meant the road would be open. The wounded behind them wouldn't stand a chance. For a long moment, the only sound was wind pushing snow across frozen branches. Finally, Harper spoke. "We're not holding the hill." The men looked at each other, confused. Then he finished, "We're making them think we are ghosts in the snow." They spread out along the ridge, firing from different positions, moving constantly. One machine gun fired short bursts from 3 separate nests to make it sound like multiple squads. Rifles cracked from shifting angles. Flares lit the sky. Grenades rolled down the slope. To the Germans below, it sounded like a full American company dug in. Vehicles halted, orders shouted in German. Columns slowed. Officers scrambled to assess the defensive position. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. Harper checked ammo pouches, nearly empty. The Germans were organizing now, not panicked anymore. Mortar teams were setting up. Infantry began moving uphill in the wide formations. This time, they were coming to finish it, the radio that shouldn't have worked. Private Ellis stumbled over through the snow, holding a damaged field radio. "Sir, I think I got something." Harper grabbed the handset. Static. Then, faint, broken, an American voice. "Any unit. This is Redstone Battery. Respond." Artillery. Somewhere miles away, a U.S. battery was still operational. Harper looked downhill. Shadows. Hundreds of them now. German troops spreading across the slope, preparing to surround the hill completely. Sergeant Miller whispered, "Sir, we can still slip out the north side. Maybe half of us make it." Harper didn't answer. He was staring at the road behind the German column, the road leading straight to the American aid station. If the enemy broke through now, there would be no defense left. He lifted the radio. "Redstone Battery, this is Able 26. We are enemy engaged on Hill 314. A pause, then, "Able 26, say, strength of enemy?" Harper looked again through the snowstorm at the sea of dark shapes below. "Estimate, several hundred, possibly 700. Another pause. "Coordinates for fire mission?" Harper swallowed. His men were watching him now. Every one of them understood. He gave the numbers. The artillery officer repeated them back, slowly. Then asked the question no one wanted to ask. "Confirm. Danger close?" Harper's grip tightened on the handset. German troops were halfway up the hill now. He closed his eyes for 1 second, then answered, "Negative." A breath. "Fire for effect. On my position." The German soldiers were halfway up the hill when the first shell landed. It didn't whistle. It didn't warn. It detonated. Snow, dirt, and shattered branches exploded into the night sky. The shockwave knocked men off their feet, American and German alike. For half a second, nobody understood what had happened. Then the second round hit, and the third, and the fourth. The hill vanished inside fire and smoke. German officers screamed orders, but their formations dissolved instantly. Soldiers dove behind trees, rocks, fallen logs, anything that might stop metal fragments flying at lethal speed. But this wasn't a normal artillery strike. The rounds weren't landing behind them. They weren't landing in front. They were landing everywhere. Up on the ridge, Harper's men clung to the frozen ground. Sergeant Miller yelled, "They're hitting us too!" Harper pressed himself into the snow, radio still in his grip. "I know." Another blast tore apart a tree just meters away, showering splinters and ice. A machine gun position disappeared in smoke. Then the gunner crawled out, ears ringing, still alive. Somewhere below, German troops began pulling back, not in organized retreat, in pure survival. They had walked into a kill zone that made no sense. What kind of commander calls artillery on his own position? The bombardment continued, shell after shell, minute after minute. The hillside turned into a churning storm of explosions and falling debris. Snow melted into steam, then froze again in the air. Harper raised the radio again. "Redstone, adjust fire, 50 meters south. Keep them pinned." The artillery officer hesitated only a second before answering. "Rounds incoming." Harper lowered the handset and looked at his men. Dirty, bleeding, terrified, but still there, still holding. Below them, the German advance had stopped completely. The road behind them, the one leading to the American aid station, was still untouched, still safe. Then the radio crackled again. "Able 2-6. Friendly reinforcements moving toward your sector. Hold if you can." Harper let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He looked down at the burning hillside, where hundreds of enemy soldiers were now scattered, stunned, retreating into the forest under relentless fire. They had expected to crush a small unit. Instead, they had run into a man who was willing to destroy the hill rather than let them pass. Harper wiped snow from his face and spoke quietly. "Redstone Battery. Fire one more mission. Pause. Then shift north. Our boys are coming." The artillery finally stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. It just ended. One moment, the hill was being torn apart by steel and fire. The next, there was only the hiss of falling snow landing on hot, shattered earth. Lieutenant Harper lifted his head from the frozen ground. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Smoke drifted through broken trees like low clouds. "Sound off!" he shouted, though he could barely hear his own voice. One by one, voices answered through the haze. "Here! Still breathing. Legs fine." Not all of them replied, but enough did. The view from the ridge. Harper crawled to the edge of the slope and looked down. The hillside that had been crawling with enemy troops an hour earlier was now torn apart. Craters, fallen trees, abandoned weapons half buried in snow. Movement, but not an attack. German soldiers were pulling back through the forest, dragging wounded, disappearing into the dark. Their advance had collapsed completely. The road behind them was still clear. The aid station was still safe. Harper finally allowed himself to breathe. They had done it, not by stopping the enemy, but by breaking their will to push forward. Footsteps in the snow. At first, they thought it was the enemy regrouping. Shapes moved through the trees on the north side of the hill. Rifles raised, helmets low. Sergeant Miller aimed down the slope, then froze. "Sir, those aren't Germans." Through the smoke and drifting snow came the unmistakable outline of American winter helmets. Friendly troops, reinforcements. A young corporal reached the ridge first, staring in disbelief at the devastation around him. "What happened here?" Miller gave a tired half-laugh. "You're standing on it." The man who stayed medics moved among Harper's men, checking wounds, wrapping bandages, helping the shaken stand. One medic looked at Harper's radio. "You the one who called that fire mission?" Harper nodded once. The medic stared at him like he couldn't decide whether Harper was brave or insane. "Sir, that was right on top of you." Harper looked down the ruined slope one last time, then back toward the quiet road behind them. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know." Morning came slowly. Gray light crept through the shattered forest, revealing what the night had hidden. The hill didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like the surface of the moon. Crater after crater. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Frozen earth torn open and blackened. American engineers climbed the ridge at first light, stopping in disbelief. "Who did this?" one asked. Sergeant Miller, wrapped in a blanket, nodded toward Harper. "He did." Counting the cost, stretcher teams moved carefully between craters, helping the wounded down the slope. Medics worked in silence, their breath fogging in the cold air. The defenders who could walk didn't talk much. They just watched. Watched as daylight revealed how close they had come to being erased from the map. A captain from the reinforcement unit approached Harper, holding a notepad. "Lieutenant, reports say the enemy force here was nearly a battalion. Is that correct?" Harper shrugged slightly. "Didn't stop to count." The captain glanced at the destruction around them. "And you held them with 18 men," Miller said from behind him. The captain stopped writing. He looked back at Harper. "You called that artillery yourself?" Harper met his eyes. "Yes, sir." A long pause. The captain closed the notebook slowly. "I'll make sure they believe it. The road behind them." Later that morning, a convoy of American ambulances rolled safely down the road behind the hill, the same road the enemy column had been heading toward. Drivers waved up at the ridge, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Harper watched them pass. For the first time since the night began, his hands stopped shaking. Not because the danger was over, but because now he knew it had meant something. Behind him, soldiers planted a small marker in the snow. Not an official sign, just a helmet on a stick. Someone scratched words into the wood with a knife. They stopped here. Harper looked at it for a long moment, then turned away. There was still a war to fight. Morning came slowly. Gray light crept through the shattered forest, revealing what the night had hidden. The hill didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like the surface of the moon. Crater after crater. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Frozen earth torn open and blackened. American engineers climbed the ridge at first light, stopping in disbelief. "Who did this?" one asked. Sergeant Miller, wrapped in a blanket, nodded toward Harper. "He did." Counting the cost, stretcher teams moved carefully between craters, helping the wounded down the slope. Medics worked in silence, their breath fogging in the cold air. The defenders who could walk didn't talk much. They just watched. Watched as daylight revealed how close they had come to being erased from the map. A captain from the reinforcement unit approached Harper, holding a notepad. "Lieutenant, reports say the enemy force here was nearly a battalion. Is that correct?" Harper shrugged slightly. "Didn't stop to count." The captain glanced at the destruction around them. "And you held them with 18 men," Miller said from behind him. The captain stopped writing. He looked back at Harper. "You called that artillery yourself?" Harper met his eyes. "Yes, sir." A long pause. The captain closed the notebook slowly. "I'll make sure they believe it. The road behind them." Later that morning, a convoy of American ambulances rolled safely down the road behind the hill, the same road the enemy column had been heading toward. Drivers waved up at the ridge, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Harper watched them pass. For the first time since the night began, his hands stopped shaking. Not because the danger was over, but because now he knew it had meant something. Behind him, soldiers planted a small marker in the snow. Not an official sign, just a helmet on a stick. Someone scratched words into the wood with a knife. They stopped here. Harper looked at it for a long moment, then turned away. There was still a war to fight. 2 weeks later, the war had already moved on. Front lines shifted. Units rotated. Reports stacked on desks miles away from the forest where the hill stood, scarred and quiet under fresh snow. But one report didn't fit. It described a small unit that held off a force nearly 40 times its size. It mentioned artillery-fired danger close, so close the shells landed among friendly positions. It listed 18 men, and one lieutenant who had given the coordinates calmly, twice, to make sure they were correct. At first, higher command thought it was a mistake. Then, reconnaissance confirmed the damage. The enemy had pulled back from that sector for nearly a full day, long enough for evacuation routes to stay open and reinforcements to seal the gap. One decision on one frozen hill had changed the timing of an entire advance. No speeches. Harper was called to battalion headquarters, still wearing the same worn winter coat. A colonel read from a paper, voice formal, careful. Your actions delayed a superior force and prevented enemy breakthrough. Casualties among your men were remarkably low. He paused, lowering the page. You understand, most officers would not have made that call. Harper nodded. Yes, sir. Why did you? Harper thought about the road, the ambulances, the wounded soldiers who never knew how close the danger had been. Then he answered simply, They were counting on us, sir. The colonel held his gaze for a long moment, then extended his hand. No one will forget what happened on that hill. But Harper knew something. Battlefields don't keep names for long. Snow falls, forests grow back, craters fill. Only stories remain. Years later, long after the war ended, a hunter hiking through the Ardennes found an old, rusted helmet tied to a weathered stick at the top of a small rise. The writing on it was almost gone, but still barely readable. They stopped here. No rank, no unit, no medals carved into stone. Just a place where a handful of soldiers chose not to move, so that others could.